Alright, so here we have the Diesel VH4 from Plugin Alliance and Brainworx. In this video, we're going to go over how this amp plugin works, go over all the parameters here, and just sort of see how everything works, how our parameter changes, of course, are going to affect our sound, check out our recording chains, and all of the options that we have in here. So let's go ahead and start off at the top. Now I'm in Studio One right now. So I have the VST3 version loaded, and for your presets, just come up here to this drop down. Now, if you don't have these by default in Studio One, just click this list icon and go to import presets, and your presets will always be in the same place for your VST3s, at least they should. Documents and your VST3 presets, Plugin Alliance, and just find your Diesel. Control A, select all of them and choose open. And then you'll have all of your factory presets right here and ready to go. And of course in Studio One over here as well. The preset location is different depending on the DAW that you're using. All right, so across the top here, again in Studio One, we have our bypass right here. But right here, we have our undo and redo. So if I make a change to say this gain, we can undo and redo that. Right here, we have a bunch of different steps that you can go through for all of your changes. Up across the top again, A, B, C, and D. So essentially every preset can have up to 4 different presets within that preset. That's kind of what it's like. So A, here's B, here's C, and here's D. So if we had B set up on, say, channel 2 for sort of a crunchy tone there. And then for C, maybe we want channel 3. Right. So then go back to A. We can have A on channel 1. Go to B. Go to C. And of course you can have D there as well. We have copy and paste. So if I want the settings from, say, B over here on D, I can just copy it here and then paste it in there. Then of course make any changes I want to this this instance of that sort of preset or those parameter states. And of course all of this affects our effects rack here as well. If I had a different impulse response loaded in here, or maybe the delay was on, obviously that's going to be copy and pasted you know, as well. Let me make sure I turn this off. We'll get to our effects rack here pretty soon. Then we have reset. So we can just choose reset. That of course puts everything to its defaults there for that slot. So whenever you call up a preset here, go ahead and go through this because they might already have 4 different settings within that preset. And of course, whenever you set up your own presets and save them, you'll go ahead and set up 4 different combinations of your preset there through A, B, C, and D, and then again quickly switch between those. So that is the top part here. So now we'll come down to our front panel here. We have low input, high input here. And let's start on 1 here. And I will grab a different little sample there. It's on low right now. Put it on high. Put it on channel 3. Put it on low. Put it on high. Then back here to channel 1, we have a bright switch for channel 1 and a bright switch for channel 2. So we'll just hear that real quick here. Turn it on. And a bright switch for channel 2 as well. So of course, we have our gain across the top, volume here, treble, middle, and bass. And you can, of course, set up each channel however you want, so you can switch between them quickly in here. So channel 1, as we already heard, is pretty clean. Some breakup in that if you want. And channel 2, again, breaking up a bit more. And channel 3 is when we really get to that metal sound. Let's grab. You know, with this amp, I turn the treble down more than I usually do on a lot of the amp plugins. It sounds pretty good with that treble down a little bit, and also the mids. It really opens up whenever you pull out some of these mids here on this VH4. On the channel 4 now, this gets extremely high gain here. All right, and then we have our deep and our presence controls here. Let's go back to channel 3, and we'll start on deep here. So our deep is a different low end than our bass. The deep really adds a lot of width and girth to the sound, and it's not, it won't get as muddy as sometimes bass can. So let's go to a different, there we go. So even with the bass all the way out, we're still getting a good low end with that deep. But of course, that's too much bass pulled out there. Then a master presence here. One thing you can do with this amp is you can pull a lot of treble out and use your presence here. And then we have, of course, our overall volume, which is self-explanatory. Then we have a mute, which is the same thing as the power on-off here. So you're just hearing the clean guitar there. Okay, so that is the front panel of our Diesel VH4. And this amp plugin, by the way, is officially endorsed by Diesel, which is why, of course, they can use the name. So let's head on back to our effects rack. And back here is where a lot of your tone shaping is going to take place, especially with our recording chains, which we're going to get to in a minute. But real quick here, let's just grab a different sample real quick. So changing your recording chain, which is essentially your cabinet and microphone, obviously makes a huge difference. But let's set up here on our gate. A gate is, of course, included. We'll come down here to this sample right here, and you'll notice, let me actually expand this out a bit, that there are breaks in between these palm mutes, just like you would have in, if you're kind of djent playing or doing a lot of palm muting. And that's where your gate's going to come in. Your gate also comes in to keep sort of the amp noise down. So if I record and enable this track, I turn my gate off, you're going to hear that amp noise, right? So turn your gate on, choose your threshold. So the overall level there, it comes through, cutting it off. and then the range, which is a really cool feature to have, because maybe you don't want that gate to sort of really close all the way down. You just want to sort of dim the areas in between your palm mutes, for example, or you can take it all the way up and really cut it off for a really, really genty sort of sound. So let's see this here. You'll see the light come on whenever we hit these areas, right in here. Right, versus it being off. A little bit of noise in there. So that's, of course, what your gate does for those who don't know. So you can get really genty with that. It's a bit too high, but that should be good for us right here. Then we have a really cool feature here. Let me squeeze this down a bit. We'll grab a different sample here. Just going to use my arrow keys here in Studio One. Hit the 1 key on my numpad. It's going to drop me into the start of that loop. And what our tight and smooth filters basically are a low pass and a high pass, okay? Or a high pass and a low pass. And we have post, pre, and off. And what these are going to do is we can use the tight filter to sort of filter out some of that low end, either before it hits the amp or after. Okay, so I use a 9-string guitar most of the time. And what I like to do with the Brainworx amps is put this on pre, so that way I can filter out some of that low end from the 8th and 9th string before it's hitting the amp here. So usually somewhere around, 80 or 90 is pretty good for that. So again, this is on pre. Again, this is filtering it out before it hits the amp. We go to post, that's going to filter out the sound after the amp, and you'll really hear the difference here. That's the same thing that would happen if you put a high pass on your amp or after your amp in your DAW. Okay, so you can use that to control your low end some if you want. All right, and then the same thing up here, except of course the opposite end for our smooth. And the smooth usually works pretty well to get rid of some of that high-end hiss, if you happen to have some. Now the Brainworx amps are really great at not having a lot of that high-end hiss, but if you do, you can filter it out with the post setting. Somewhere around, it really depends, but 11,000 to say 20 or so, actually more closer to 15 or so. It just depends, of course, where that hiss is. Or if your pickups are really bright, you could put that on pre to again filter out that that high-end noise before it's actually hitting the amp. Put it on post. So that's what our tight and smooth filters are for. I'll just put it on post and put it around 16 for now. That sounds pretty good to me. And by the way, you can adjust your parameters by just hovering over them and using the scroll wheel on your mouse. So head over here now to our delay, which is a great feature to have in any amp. It's one of the reasons why I really like all of the Brainworx amps from Plugin Alliance, because they have a really cool delay built right in here. Let's go to this sample right here. Let's go to channel 1. Why not? Awesome. So we can tap our tempo right here if you want. Adjust it here. We can go ×2 divided by 2. We can have this, of course, linked to our host BPM, which of course is 120. We can get different time divisions of that in here as well. Let me put this back up to somewhere around 666 because that is totally metal. You can also double click in here and just, type in whatever you want. Then our mix knob, which is sort of, self-explanatory. So start off somewhere around 10% and then sort of just, just dial that up to taste, then feedback. Again, sort of self-explanatory. How many times is that going to feedback? So if we pull this way down. Now let's turn it way up. You can hear those feedbacks continuing here, just continuing. Right. So again, start around 30%. And then lo-fi will sort of dirty it up a little bit with some of that lo-fi character. All right, then down here, our input gain, so we can compensate for our audio file, or if you just really want to hit that preamp a lot harder. Let's grab something here. Channel 3, turn the delay off for now. Really hit that preamp hard here. Usually, of course, you can have this on 0, so I'll just control click and set that down to 0. You can bypass the preamp if you want to. If you want to send this out to a different preamp. Bypass the power amp as well. We have power soak, so we can really power soak this here, and then use our volume here and here to sort of compensate for that level and hit that power amp in a different way. And it's going to be a little bit of a different tone that way. Right. So usually you're going to have this around -10 or so, at least to start out with. And this sound will be a little bit different, though the level should be about the same. Okay, pretty cool. So let's move on now to the real tone shaping area, which is our recording chains, which are impulse responses. And our impulse responses are essentially the same thing you find in some other amp plugins, where you're going to choose a cabinet and you're going to choose a microphone. In this case, they're just impulse responses of different cabinets, microphones, and sometimes some other outboard gear, like maybe an EQ or something like that. And as you can tell here, if I select number 1, and let me just choose something different here. That's going to sound radically different from, say, this. All right, so use your minus or plus buttons there to scroll through those. Or of course, just click and go through your list here. Now we have a bunch of different recording chains, about 119. Now one thing that would be cool if Plugin Alliance would implement this is put these in folders for each manufacturer. So have all of our Marshall cabs in a folder, American cabs in a folder, Orange cabs, Diesel cabs, so on and so forth in a folder. That way I don't have to scroll through this big long list here, but we'll come down to the bottom and we have no recording chain. So you can select that if you want to use your own impulse response loader and use your own impulse responses. Another cool thing that would be a great addition to this would be if they would add a user slot in here that would allow you to navigate to your own impulse responses. So that way you don't have to use a separate impulse response loader. If you look at something like the Waves PRS models, they have that built in, or look at something like Hellbeast from Audio Assault, they have that built in as well, where you can choose any impulse response that you want, which is pretty cool. So we'll just grab an American, which is a Mesa cabinet. And then we have this RC info, which is different from our other Brainworx amps. This is a new addition. Click that and you can actually see the equipment used to produce this recording chain. And you can see Mesa Boogie, cab there, microphone, preamp, EQ, so on and so forth as we scroll through these here. So let's go back here. We'll grab a diesel cab. You can see that right there. Then we have this auto feature right here, and it can auto switch for you on 1 bar, 2 bar, all the way up to 8 bars. And this is really useful when you're actually playing guitar. So that way you're not having to stop and actually click a button or something to find a different recording chain. You can just play, just play your guitar, or of course play back your audio file and then have those automatically switch for you. So we'll leave this on 1 bar for now. And let's go to a different sample again, and we'll turn on auto and we'll just play back. You can see us switching right here. So once you get to something that you like, just deselect auto and of course go back 1 or forward 1 if you happened to miss it. So in that little sample there, you could really hear the differences between these recording chains. That one sounds really good there. Let's try something more metal here. This is our Marshall cabinets here. Try a Mesa cabinet, as you can see right there. And we'll check out some of the orange cabs, 2x12s. Onto the Shore cabs, and these sound really good. Scroll down here again. Get this to get to this area, and we'll grab say 91. So as you can tell, your recording chains are going to make a huge difference to your sound. So once you find one, you're probably going to have to tweak your parameters, at least somewhat. All right, so that's basically everything you need to know about the Diesel VH4 from Plugin Alliance and Brainworx.